Hello, Nicholas here, programmer for the game Ritual. Now that GMTK Game Jam 2020 is over, we are dropping what amounts to a bugless build of the game. The version uploaded for the Game Jam was riddled with bugs, one that made making it through the second tier impossible. Now you can actually make it through all 3 tiers, unlock all the demon abilities, and perform the ritual that'll exorcise you of the demon. We also stopped the controls from sliding, used get access raw, not get access, made the spikes less punishing, and added a flashing effect to indicate when enemies are damaged. Feel free to play it, it's out now. For the rest of the post, I wanted to take a look at Ritual. First, how the game turned out, the bugs, the feedback, our rankings, my thoughts, and then, probably the more exciting part of this post, I brainstormed where Ritual could go from here. As of writing this, the results of the Game Jam have not dropped, though the rating/voting is over. Looking at our place in the most rated category, Ritual is the 552nd most rated game, or in the 89th percentile. This of course speaks nothing to what the actual ratings in the end were. What is more likely to predict anything would be the comments the game received. First off, the jam build was buggy, so the primary mention in the comments were those due to bugs/time constraints. This includes slippery movement, a soft lock partway through tier 2, lack of audio, lack of feedback on enemies getting hit, some overwhelmingness when it came to the controls listing everything at once at the beginning of the game, and spike hitboxes being much too big. A lot of these were major issues commenters had with the game, sometimes being the reason they couldn't enjoy playing it. I wish we had had the time to catch these things ourselves and fix them during the jam, but that's just the way the development rolled, and I believe these issues have been fixed in the newest version. Second, the art was fantastic. Over half of the 25 comments complimented the presentation in this game. The artist, Alex Choate, and pair of docs deserve credit for this, as they blew it out of the water with quality and quantity. They made all and any assets I asked about during the jam. Third, the controls were cool, overwhelming, or both. The player's abilities appear to have been fun to use, though a number of commenters mention it being overwhelming. However, it's impossible to know where the players found the controls overwhelming, and hence if the game is any better with this newest build. As stated before, the jam build showed the players the whole of the controls when they first booted up the game. It lists every ability you unlock, and I'm sure the number of those overwhelmed thought they had control over every single one of these abilities, instead of the default 3, absorb, swipe, and shield. But how many players would still be overwhelmed by just those 3? If no one would be, then the problem is solved. If not, hopefully the fact that the controls now have a description of each of these abilities helps, but we'll just have to wait and see how the other players react. Last of all, possession. 4 comments explicitly mentioned the game's main mechanic, 2 are positive, 1 was negative, and 1 appeared neutral. Taking away control from the player in the demon context is cool, although a little jarring, but it certainly fits the theme. Additionally, a large portion of the comments complimented the game's concept. Assuming they meant the possession, being the game's introduction is explicitly focused on it, we did a good job. My personal stance on the jam build. The bugs were bad. Sometimes they were enjoyment killers. I hope in this bugless build they're gone, and the players are no longer overwhelmed by the controls. If we did this right, based off the feedback, Ritual should be so much more fun. The future possibilities. I like Ritual under the context of being the product of a 48-hour game jam. The art is stylish, the mechanics are novel, and I think it's fun to get all the way to the end. I feel like it was an accomplishment. However, I think it's undeniable that Ritual has room to grow. Even though its positive praise from a friend ended stating, with a good story and maybe bosses, it could be a nice $5 game. So, in what ways could Ritual be grown given more time and work? Procedural generation of rooms. The initial plan was to create a number of handcrafted interiors for the different tiers of the dungeons, then procedurally generate rooms that populated themselves by pulling from the interiors that we made. In the finished version, the room's interiors being randomized from a handcrafted batch did happen, but there wasn't enough time to create a room generator. Procedural generation of both the rooms and their interiors could add to the game's replayability. The hard part would be figuring out the rules of our game's layout to ensure it's fun. Take, for example, the map our team's designer wanted for Ritual once he learned procedural generation would not be possible. Tiers were supposed to have a different number of rooms and differences in how they were connected. For example, Tier 1 in blue was supposed to have these sprawling paths that would lead to dead ends. Additionally, in Tiers 2 and 3, instead of players always coming upon all the items like they do in the current game, the power-up players currently get midway through a tier would have been put in a room they would have not necessarily come upon. It would have been an incentive for the player to go out and explore. These traits are things that, assuming we decide is the correct direction to go, would have to be incorporated into the procedural generation. As more things are touched on, note that it would also need to be incorporated into the rules we make to control the procedural generation. An extra final tier. The last room of the game is a different aesthetic from the game's tiers. Instead of a brown 1, dark 2, and red 3, the last room is purple. Perhaps purple could be the backdrop of a final gauntlet tier, one with no new items or power-ups, just purely fighting through the last, most difficult rooms of the game. I imagine beating the game would feel so much more satisfying that way. Out of anything, I think this would be the most foreshore addition out of anything on the list, but if the Tier 3 were to be massive, it could be rejected in place of increasing sprinkles of purple in the red Tier 3 rooms as you near the end. Ritual pieces. Pieces, ingredients, gems required to perform whatever exorcism ritual is in the final room. It would have to be explored for and found, adding more incentive for the player to keep going around the dungeon. Bosses! Enemies with big health bars at the top of the screen with rooms dedicated to housing them. Maybe you'd have to kill with power-ups you got leading up to the fight. Maybe they drop power-ups. Maybe the demon that possessed you is the final boss. Pillars. Another means of losing the game. What if some of the rooms had 2 to 4 pillars in them? The possessed version of your character could run into a pillar and destroy it, and if all the pillars in the room were destroyed, the ceiling would collapse and you'd die. Pillars could be randomly scattered about, chosen specifically for rooms that you may revisit, or reserved for boss rooms. A story, game info. More text in-game may have helped players learn the game faster, like absorbing demon souls to regain health/mana. It also could have helped to create lore for the enemies and power-ups that the dev team understood but were unable to explicitly communicate. Hopefully this tutorial/teaching and lore would be intertwined to make all the text helpful and engaging to read. We could also provide world building, character development, or a basic player motivation. Maybe there's a story to tell here. Corruption. Corruption was supposed to play a major part in Ritual. The value decreases slowly if it's above 0, but increases with the use of demonic abilities and the absorption of demon souls. The higher the corruption value, the more likely demonic things like possession, floor decaying, enemy wave spawning, and stuff like that were to occur. This value would mean a rebalancing of most of the game. Perhaps the demonic abilities would no longer cost mana because the corruption increase was so bad. Perhaps certain demonic things would decrease the corruption once it happened. Perhaps higher corruption makes the player more powerful in order to mix some of the reward with the risk. Perhaps corruption never decreases or slowly increases. There's a lot to unpack if corruption is considered. More stuff. More demonic abilities, more wizard spells, more enemies, more tiers, more hazards. You get the idea. Handcrafting the game. What if, instead of total procedural generation, we handcrafted parts of the game? What if Ritual had planned events, dialogue, rooms, or barricades that required a set power-up to get past? Here's an example. The player enters a line of rooms now adorned with torches that light up the room. After 2 or 3 rooms with all the torches lit, one room only has torches on the side of the room the player entered from it lit. The torches on the other side aren't, and it fades to pitch black. The next room is completely pitch black, no torches are lit, and then the room after that, the torches are lit on the wall opposite the player. The player picks up whatever power-up or thing that it needs to make it necessary to progress, and suddenly the unlit torches in the room light up, and the whole room's alight. You turn around and walk back into the room that was previously pitch black. The torches are alight, and a boss stands in the middle of the room, and you have to fight it. I feel like something similar to that, or more complex even, would be fantastic to have in our game. Ritual could feel more epic, like Zelda, Metroid, or Minoria. Then again, something so handcrafted may call for a lot more narrative writing, world building, cutscenes, arts, and mechanics. I find such a possibility exciting, but I understand that 1. Procedurally generated dungeon crawlers are appreciated as they are, 2. Replayability is important, and 3. That's a lot of work that requires a lot out of other team members, not just me. I can't claim to know the best decision to take our game. Conclusion. So that was a lot. A lot of possibilities, a lot of balancing, and a lot of working things from the ground up. And still, there's the question of, are you going to keep working on this game? I don't know. I would like to see this game grow, but I think it would mean sitting down, putting down a lot in design docs, and I'm not a designer, planning, play testing, and having some kind of production management. I'd need a team, or at least some direction for where Ritual should go. For that reason, I would love to hear people's thoughts. Thoughts on the current build, thoughts on the possibilities we listed. If you think we should turn this into a full-fledged game, say so. If you have any idea about how to even move forward on this, on anything, please say so. I am all ears. Comment below. Thank you for watching.